My name is Liz McGill. I'm the Dean of the Stanford Law School, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the 19th Directors College. It's a real pleasure and a privilege for me to welcome you on behalf of the Rock Center for Corporate Governance to this evening and the coming days' events. It's really gratifying for me, this is my first Directors College as Dean, to see so many of you here, and I really appreciate you coming. As you all know better than I do, this has been an interesting year for the markets and for all of your companies, and the issues you're going to wrestle with and think about over the coming days are more critical than ever. Board strategy and risk management, crisis management, financial reform legislation, and many more topics. I think you're in the right place, though, to learn and think about these topics. Directors College for 19 years has been helping directors learn about, reflect on, and think about the issues that they face each day. I want to thank the Rocks. Arthur Rock is right up here. Toni's not with us tonight, but she'll be with us in the coming days. They have, of course, created the Rock Center and have been incredibly supportive of the law school and business school's effort to advance the understanding of the practice of corporate governance. This program tonight would not be possible, and the Directors College would also not be possible without the support of our many affiliates, and many of you are here tonight, and you make Directors College possible as well, and I thank you. This evening's dinner is sponsored by NASDAQ, also a sponsor of Directors College in general, and they have had a continuing partnership with the Rock Center for many years to make this evening and this event possible. They've been a great collaborator over the years. I'm going to introduce to you Bruce Ost, who's the Executive Vice President and Global Client Group of the Global Client Group at NASDAQ OMX. He has served and developed overseas global business and relationship management with the 3,400 companies listed on NASDAQ OMX in their 16 different markets. He oversees a nationwide sales force in the U.S., as well as global representatives serving in many countries: China, Israel, India, Russia, Japan, Korea, South America, and the Nordic and Baltic regions. During Mr. Ost's tenure, NASDAQ OMX has attracted some of the country's highest profile IPOs, including Google, Baidu, and JetBlue. Mr. Ost is an honored guest tonight, and I'm really happy to have him here, and please join me in welcoming him. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for the introduction. We are certainly proud to be sponsoring such an incredible event and to work with Stanford Directors College now for so many years. It's a great program, and tonight we have a very special evening planned with two individuals who exemplify the elite of the technology community, John Donahoe and Marissa Mayer. It's my honor to introduce them tonight. Let me first start with John. John's company, eBay, which is happily a part of the NASDAQ family, is a success story we all know. What you may not know is that John Donahoe is a master of acquiring and keeping talent. He spent 20 years rising through the ranks of Bain & Company to the level of CEO. Now, as the CEO of eBay since 2008, he is overseeing the acquisition of standout companies such as StubHub and Shopping.com. Under his leadership, 15 of the 20 CEOs of the companies eBay has acquired have remained at eBay. Certainly a testament to his ability to allow innovators to innovate, and a testament to his leadership and providing with the resources and guidance necessary to take their vision to the next level. Like John, Marissa Mayer is the CEO of a NASDAQ-listed company that we all know, Yahoo. In her short time as CEO of Yahoo, Marissa has proven herself as a visionary and an agent of change. Before Yahoo, when she was at Google, Marissa first became known for making Google the leader in location-based software like Google Maps and Google Earth. Now at Yahoo, Marissa has become a master of reinventing products we thought we already knew. Flickr is just one example that she vaulted from a utilitarian photo sharing tool to a social photo experience, giving users enough space in the cloud to hold all of their photos. In her quest for innovation and her desire to enhance Yahoo's growth story, Marissa just last week closed on the strategic acquisition of Tumblr. I personally look forward to seeing what these two dynamic leaders have to share with us this evening. And tonight's conversation will be led by someone who needs a very little introduction, my friend Joe Grunfest. Joe is the William A. Franke Professor of Law and Business here at Stanford Law School, where he's a senior faculty at the Rock Center for Corporate Governance. Before Stanford, Joe was a commissioner at the SEC. He's also the founder and director of the great program that we're all attending over the next few days. Joe is also co-founder and director of Financial Engines, the world's largest registered investment advisor. Financial Engines has a $70.8 billion of assets under management as of its most recent quarter end, and the company is a classic Stanford Silicon Valley startup, and also, I'm very proud to say, a recently listed NASDAQ company. So now it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Joe, John, and Marissa to delight you with what I know will be a very interesting conversation. Coming up.
Marissa, please. Sure. Great. Okay. We comfortable? I'm comfortable.
Yep.
You comfortable? John?
good.
Marissa? All right, good. So what I'd like to do, if I just may very briefly, is, Marissa, begin with some congratulations. All right, can you guess what I'm congratulating you about?
No.
Do you think it's about your becoming CEO of Yahoo?
No.
I think that's right. No,
I don't know. Maybe Tumblr. I don't know.
No. Do you think it's about the wonderful birth of your son, McAllister? Is that what I'm congratulating you about?
Probably not. It's a
Probably.
while ago.
Do you think it may be that your stock price is now hovering around 25, whereas when you were first appointed CEO, the stock price was a mere 16? Do you think that might be it?
Maybe.
Maybe that's what I should be congratulating you about. But, you know, given where we are, and this is Stanford, I'm going to congratulate you about something entirely different that I bet you nobody else in this room knows about. Marissa was just awarded her 13th patent, all right, by the United States Patent Office. Okay? Is there anybody else in this room with 13 patents? All right, anybody else with 13 patents, stand up. There you go, we got one. Stand up. We got two. Come on, stand up. There you go. At Stanford, you get a shout out for having 13 or more patents. That's the kind of room that we are. Congratulations, I think that's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
So, John, we've done a little bit of research, and it turns out that at eBay...
I have no patents.
There you go. That
Zero.
was my point. But I was going to humiliate you even more than that. We've done a little bit of research here, John, and it turns out that there are, at a minimum, 491 patents that have been issued to eBay. You've acquired other companies, all right, that have had patents issued to them. And I was going to ask you, of this minimum of 491, how many list you as inventor here, John?
Zero.
Nothing. So in this competition between John and Marissa, I think we have a clear winner. Ladies and gentlemen. Now, the other thing that's really interesting in this situation is John has been through a situation that involves, in effect, a turnaround of a major Silicon Valley company. And John has been described in several publications as the best CEO in all of Silicon Valley. Because as a practical matter, John may actually have pulled off the most successful turnaround in the history of Silicon Valley.
So far.
So far. I was going to say, don't get too comfortable.
There's no one rooting for Marissa harder than I am.
Don't.
I appreciate it.
All right.
All the
Now,
time.
Marissa, no pressure here. All right. You are in charge of one of the most important ongoing turnarounds in Silicon Valley. All right. Obviously, the situation at Yahoo and the situation at Hewlett-Packard as well. And you're off to an, in my view, absolutely spectacular and blazing start. One of the hardest things to do in all of corporate America, whether it's in technology or any other sector, is to turn a company around. It's easier to start a company afresh and be a success than to take a company that's stumbled and put it back on the right track. John, I wonder if you can start us off by sharing some of the experience that you've had about turning a company around, and then I'd love to turn to you, Marissa, and describe to us what you're going through, what your vision is for making this change at Yahoo. John?
Well, Joe, the first thing I'd say, and we've never talked about this, but Silicon Valley is not known for producing a lot of great enduring companies. And I feel a great weight and burden and opportunity to help eBay. eBay's founder, Pierre Omidyar, when I was first hired, said, I want to create a company that lasts for 25, 30 years. And eBay's a brand that deserves that. Yahoo's a brand that deserves that. HP, what Meg's doing, is a brand that deserves that, and a company that does that. And so the first thing I would say is the most important thing in a turnaround situation is a strong sense of purpose. If your employees, because you're not getting any positive feedback from anywhere, and if your employees don't have a strong sense of purpose and belief that there's some reason to go through the pain, then you can't even take the first step. Because, as you well know, you get very little positive feedback. But in our case, there were 3 or 4 things that ended up being important. The first is we had to face up to reality. We had to call it a turnaround, which was not a word that our employees wanted to hear, our customers wanted to hear, investors or the media, but it was the truth. Everyone knew we needed to make change, but we were a little bit in denial about the change we needed to make. And so by confronting the reality and labeling that this is going to be challenging, it's going to take more than a year. It's going to take, in our case, we said at least 3 years. Turned out to be an important starting point. And then in eBay's case, we had to re-inject innovation and technology back into the company. We had lost our edge in terms of innovating. And frankly, had become too complacent with what was historical success. So that just involved, you can't innovate unless you have the right people. And that involved bringing in technology talent. Bruce was saying, we've made multiple acquisitions and others, bringing really strong technologists and innovators and putting them into positions of responsibility. An extreme example of that is we bought a company called Zong, which was founded by a 3-time founding entrepreneur, a guy named David Marcus. And brilliant product visionary, the right guy. He'd never managed more than 200 people in his career, and I put him in charge of 12,000. I put him in charge of PayPal. And I said, David, I can help you manage 11,800 people. That's not hard. But driving product innovation and driving it through is the hard job. And that's what he's now doing as the leading PayPal. And then the last thing we had to do was just make a couple of big bets. And in our case, the bets were mobile and PayPal. And we bet early and we bet hard in both. And both have turned out to be relatively successful. So it's not a lot of fun along the way. You don't get a lot of positive feedback, but it's certainly in our case, we want to build an enduring company that lasts. And we've taken some positive steps to get there.
Marissa, what do you see as the strategy at Yahoo, and do you see any parallels with the experience that John's gone through?
Almost identical. I think that John's a lot further down the experience than I am, but I think that actually a lot of the things that were required to make the necessary changes were in place before I got there. Yahoo had gone through a period of a lot of turmoil, and I think that one of the things I saw when I got there is that the employees were ready to run. They were like, okay, they had gone through the hostile takeover bid from Microsoft. They had gone through the recession. They had gone through all the churn at the top. And they were like, okay, have we figured this out yet? Are we ready to go? Mm-hmm. Because they had a lot of energy around really wanting to change and do something. So I think that really laid the groundwork for what we need to do. And we also have set the stage that it will take several years to really grow the way we want to grow. We basically, everything in the consumer internet grows. We need to grow. And ultimately, if we first want to grow as fast as the market, and later we want to grow faster than the market, we're actually gaining share. And so all of those things were in place. And some of my predecessors have done some really smart things that have helped us. So, we've done the same thing. One have been doing a lot of different talent acquisitions, but some of them were there from the very beginning. In fact, one of the best technical leaders we have, same story, was the founder of a little company called Into Now, 11 people. I put him in charge of mobile. He's grown that team from 30 to 300 in 10 months. And when you look at things like Yahoo Weather and Flickr and a lot of what we've got going on that's really tremendous in the mobile space, it's all coming from Adam Cahan's group. I think for me, the one thing that I think about is what we really need to do is to reinvent ourselves. And in technology, it's hard to reinvent yourself because reinvention requires platform shift. And platform shift is scary because in order to ride platform shift, it's like surfing. You need there to be a wave. Right? When you think about Apple really invented the mobile wave and they rode that. IBM rode the wave to services. Amazon arguably rode the wave to cloud. eBay rode the wave to mobile payments and things like that. And but the good news is that the mobile wave is so big that if you catch even part of it, you can use it to ride that reinvention. And so we're really getting very focused around our mobile presence and what we can do there because a lot of the services Yahoo has to offer are exactly what people want on their phones.
But from an organizational perspective, one of the things that I hear from both of you is that the process of turning a company around requires that you admit the mistakes that you've made in the past. And admitting mistakes within an organization can be an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, especially if you've got people that are staying with the organization through the transition. What experience have you had internally, both at the board level and at the company level, in terms of saying, look, we made mistakes, all right? We had problems. We're in a turnaround situation only because we missed some great opportunities. How do you get people to accept that reality and then to change?
Oh, it's the opposite. They're trying to get you to accept it.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone in the organization knows it.
Brilliant.
It's all they talk about. They see, and they're just trying to get the leaders to face up to reality. And
So you mean the problem at the end of the day?
I mean, you go down 2-3 levels. It took me did not take long. You go down 2-3 levels inside the organization. They'll tell you what's going on.
So the problem is with the CEO and the board. The
Always.
problem is not, okay, good. That's what I was fishing for, all right? Because the next set of questions I wanted to ask is, now wait a minute. What we're here with is a room of directors, all right, of corporations, and what you've just told me is when you get a company that's in a turnaround situation, the employees understand what's been done wrong for years. The employees are really close to the ground, and they see the opportunities that have been missed, and they kind of go, the captain is steering the ship in the wrong direction, all right? How do you work with a board that's been involved in the wrong decisions and in approving the wrong decisions to turn it around?
Well, so in the case of Yahoo, we have a relatively new board. Our board was basically reformulated about 3 months before I came in last April. But I mean, I found the same thing that John did, which was that the issues, I think, were at the board level, CEO, and even SVP level, because when we went out to the broad base of employees, they already are very accepting of it. In fact, this past spring, we ran a program where we challenged people to bring us their ideas. Mm-hmm. Like, what were the ideas that they had that were transformational, that could either add incremental revenue or fundamentally new revenue? And I had to say, we threw it out there as a challenge and did a little bit of a sprint around it to get ideas in and evaluate them. And I thought that we would maybe get like 25 or 40 ideas.
You got hundreds.
We got 400 ideas.
Yeah.
And at the all team that Friday, it was interesting because this group of about 5 to 7 employees came up to me and they said, we want to say thank you. And I said, well, why are you thanking me? We haven't won the challenge yet. And also, like, I haven't even green-lighted your idea yet. And they said, we want to say thank you now before you do any of those things because we don't want our thank you to be polluted by those outcomes. We want to thank you because you were the first set of management to actually ask us for our ideas, and we have a lot of them. And I think that there was a lot of pressure in the earlier regimes over the past few years to try and figure it out on their own. And the truth is the employees are really eager to help, and they have lots of ideas, and nobody knows and understands the company and the opportunities better. So what we've been working on is actually a lot of transparency from the employees to the board. So it started off, and it was kind of radical when we first got there. You know, I had come from Google. At Google, the management team presents the board slides to the company. They have the board meeting, and then on that Friday, they show the board slides to the company. So I showed up at Yahoo, and I said, I'm going to demystify the board. I'm going to present the slides once at the board, and then with a slight bit of sanitization from our general counsel, which he demanded, like, I will present them again on Friday. And everyone was like,
to the whole company.
To the whole company, and they were like,
there you go.
What will happen? What will happen? And truth is, I think people just felt a lot more comfortable with what information was being presented, the decisions that were being made. Then we've now actually taken it further, which both the board and the company likes, which is I talked to the Mozilla CEO, and he said, oh yeah, we do that, but also we go further. The company writes the slides. I said, how does the company write the slides? Well, they said, well, we have other slides too, but the company votes for the highlights and lowlight issues that need to be presented to the board.
So you crowdsource the board presentation at Mozilla.
Yes. And so now we do it at Yahoo too. So actually, I mean, I have a board meeting this
I just
week.
want you to know, every lawyer in this room right now is feeling a little bit like this.
So, but basically, we have a board meeting Monday and Tuesday this week. On Tuesday morning, we have a half-an-hour segment that's fully dedicated to the highlights and lowlights that were voted up using a moderator tool by the employees last week. And I've told them, well, I reserve the right to deduplicate. I will present exactly what they vote up and down on the moderator tool in the order that they present it. So, like, if they think something's a lowlight and I think it's a highlight, it ends up on the lowlight slide. Right, it's what they say, and we present it that way. And the board loved it. In fact, it was so funny because like it's sort of the hammer nail problem, because I showed them this moderator tool, and then at the end they were like, "Why don't we have a moderator? Why don't we talk about this?" And we were like, "Well, because we're only like 11 people, and as a result, like we don't need a moderator tool. You need a moderator tool." Like literally, we had more than 6,000 employee votes on both of the last two crowdsourcings.
Well, I haven't heard of anything like that at any other company in the United States.
Well, Mozilla.
Right, yeah, except Mozilla. But Mozilla is a little unique.
I borrowed it from them, so yeah.
All right, so basically it's a non-profit organization, all right, that owns a for-profit, web browser.
Yeah.
Okay, but the idea that you crowdsource the conversation that you have in the boardroom from the employees, or you crowdsource a part of that conversation, I've never heard of any company doing. John, have you ever heard of that?
No. And I think there's a principle I like, and then one watch out. I don't want my employees worrying about what the hell the board's doing. I want them worrying about my customers. And so I don't, you've had a board history that you're repairing. Sure. I don't even want my senior management worrying about what the board think. What the board thinks is we ought to be spending more time with our customers. And so I think board interaction with the organization is really important. And this is a very creative way to do it. And I think that principle is a important thing. And anyone that's on a board that doesn't get access to senior management without the CEO being around, and even lower level management, should raise their hands. We do a lot of that. And that's the principle I think that you're getting at, and that's quite important. But when the narrative inside of a company comes, everyone's worrying what the board thinks, that's not a really healthy thing, I don't think, necessarily, over time.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that for us, it's really about demystifying, because
Yes,
the
'cause you have
Yahoo
history.
board has done some very
You've had-
surprising things
Yeah.
in the past.
and
And this is a new board, and we want to say it's a new board, it's a new day, we communicate in a new way. They'll tell you what they're seeing, you know, and you can talk directly to them, and that.
And I think it's very
really
creative. And so
helpful.
any of you that are in a company where you're on a board where the relationship with the employees needs to be repaired or demystified. But I'd also say, if the organization's worrying about what the board's doing and thinking, that's time spent away from customers or employees or other things. And so I think demystifying, I sit on the Intel board. Arthur was on the Intel board for 30 years. And one of the things we've tried to do over the last few years is actually demystify what the board's doing and have people worry less about what the board's doing.
Well, one of the issues that comes up very often is trying to figure out how to open up the information flow to the board of directors. Because one of the most difficult situations in corporate America is that in many situations, a board knows only what management decides to tell it. And many managers that drive corporations into the ground are able successfully to achieve that objective by controlling information flow to the board of directors. And the board will say, we made the right decisions based on the information we were given, and the board can be entirely correct. The information was controlled. They never saw the other side of the story. They never understood the risks and the benefits of other decisions that might have been made. They never got the dark side of some of the recommendations that management was making. And one of the things that I'm learning from Marissa over here is that at least at some companies, there's a set of very accessible tools that can really bridge the gap between the board of directors and all of the corporation's employees in terms of bypassing management's strict control over that information flow. We can use some of this new technology basically to anonymously allow the employees that are dealing with the customers that know, gee, we've got this new product, and guess what? The customers hate it. All right? Our management is selling it really hard to the board, and they're going to be able to talk it up for another 18 months, but we're going to fall on our face. And if I've got a safe way to tell the board of directors this isn't working, I can help save the company, help my job. I think this is really a very interesting transformation that people haven't looked at that way.
Yeah, technology could be helpful.
Even to a board of directors.
Yeah. But there's no substitute. So in an additive sense, if you're on a board and you're not getting access to people inside the company, and access that you trust, access that's not managed, then you should be raising your hand, right? I mean,
absolutely.
And whether it's dinners with a leadership team or getting access to different parts of the organization where you can have a conversation and interaction. I mean, I think there's no substitute for that. And
how much, by the way, do you guys pay attention to your company's stock price, and how and why? Marissa?
Well, it's funny because I didn't think it would be as radical as it ended up being, but when I got there, it was funny because the stock price was in the 15s. And I was looking at our internal homepage the first day, and I was like, that's weird. Why do they have military time on top? And also, I thought it was 4 o'clock because it was like 15:30 something, right? And I was like, oh, like that's the stock price. And it was literally like on our internal homepage higher than the logo, like the first thing you see. And I mean, it just was coloring all the employees' morale like all day long, right? Like I mean, you could just tell when the stock price was up because they were all seeing it and they were in a better mood, and you could tell when the stock price was down because they were like in like, and I was like, this is, and I basically said like,
this is psychotic.
This is crazy because I said like, look, I was like, if anyone has responsibility for the stock price, it's probably me, but on the average day, there's very little that I can even do about it. Right. And I just said like, honestly, just take it down. Back in my time at Google, when we went public, we actually had a rule that if you were caught looking at the stock price during business hours, you had to buy the person who caught you. So it was a self-leasing system, a share of stock. So of course, as Google stock rose, like there was a whole lot of iPods trading and like things like that, which as a manager I never knew, but that was like the rule on my team. And as I just said, like, look, our goal is to grow the company. Our goal is to grow revenue. Our goal is not to manage the stock price. And certainly there's some things that we do, like stock buybacks, that are designed to return capital to investors, and there certainly is some element of stock price management there. But on day in and day out, you don't want the employees focused on the stock price. So we deleted it. A lot of people said, hey, where did it go? And I said, look, if you really want to go and find out where the stock is, like, I'm going to make you at least do a Yahoo search for it.
Right. And they better not use Google Finance. That's all I can do. Use Google Finance, you got to buy 10 shares of stock. All right, Yahoo just won. John, what about you?
very similar. We I don't think I've ever had a conversation with our board about the share price, interestingly, or inside the company. And because there's just nothing good about it, especially in our sector where there's just massive volatility. And if you look over 5-year periods, what you have runs up and then it's flat for a while. So it's not a good indicator of traction and progress over any shorter period of time than 3 to 5 years.
So you tend to look more at the fundamentals of the business.
Yeah, we look at the fundamentals of growth and growth in our businesses. Growth is the most important fundamental really to look at.
Mm-hmm. You look at what you can control, and then the market does with that whatever the market does.
Right.
Because you can't control the multiples that the market's going to wind up putting on whatever the results are that you generate.
Correct. And experience would say over time, multiples can be almost manipulated in ways that don't always predict the long-term sustainability.
We like not using the word manipulated here at the law school. I don't, every time I hear this manipulated word, I kind of go like, let's find another word over here. I don't know why. Let me ask you one question before we go to questions from the audience, which are typically far better than questions that we could ask up here. You got a board of directors. What can a board of directors do to help you, and how does a board of directors get in the way? All right, what kind of advice can you share with everybody in this room? How are you a constructive force, and how sometimes, gosh, I wish this meeting was over?
Great question. Go ahead.
I think...
John, you really are a gentleman, I gotta say.
I think that, for me, I really like being challenged. I think that you want to have a healthy amount of good debate around any type of investment or big decision that you're making. And so I really think that, I look to our board to really challenge us. And I also think that there's all kinds of actual, on a smaller level, more, introductions, knowledge from the industry. Hey, we're looking at doing this. What's typical? What have you seen elsewhere? What kind of, what should shape this decision? So those are the types of things that are ultimately really helpful.
John?
Yeah, Joe, I'd say 2 or 3 things have really worked well for us. One is something, frankly, I stumbled into that's worked really well is I now start every board meeting in exec session alone with the board, and I say, here's what's keeping me up at night. Here's what I'm worried about. Here's where I have anxiety, and so I want you to know that. And second, over the next, our board meetings are a day and a half. I say, here's the agenda, but here's the things I want your feedback on tomorrow at the end, because I'll have exec session at the end. And what I found, because early on I was getting feedback on stuff I didn't really need feedback on, and I wasn't getting feedback on what I really wanted feedback on. And there was a sort of what's happened now is the meetings feel like they have more focus around the issues, and we at the end then can really talk about the real issues. And sometimes we can do that with management in the room, and often we don't. Often we have the meeting and we'll have a couple of hour exec session at the end where we can really have the conversation. So that's been one thing that's been helpful. Second is minimizing administrative stuff, minimizing committee reports, minimizing the things that aren't really value added of everyone's time when everyone's in the room. And then the third thing has been using board members outside the boardroom tied to their expertise. What a Mark Andreessen or a Max, in your case, can do with engineers is fantastic, and that's different than what in our case, David Moffat, who understands banking, can do with the PayPal team. And so giving each board member an assignment of where I want them to map into the organization, have direct access around an area where they have expertise, and vice versa. So everyone feels involved and utilized. So those things have worked well. The general observation, I haven't had a lot of it, when things don't work well is when they're trying to set strategy or trying to assist in communication. We need to communicate this better. That drives me crazy when I hear that. So in general, boards that I think it's partly the CEO's job is to help open up where you want board engagement. And then if the board says, what about these areas? And that dynamic builds. I think a healthy dynamic can build.
I think that's terrific. Let's open it up. Speaking of a healthy dynamic building, let's open it up to questions from the audience over here. Oh, come on, that's not...
Okay, well...
That's great. That's really terrific. We got a question there. Could we have a microphone?
Great conversation so far. It's very fun to have you both on stage. John, you said something about you cringe when the board helps you set strategy. And maybe those weren't your words, and I know you're a fabulous former Bain consultant. That sort of surprised me because do you think that's because your expertise is around strategy, or my sense with the boards I've been on is a lot of the CEOs like help with strategy. So it'd be great to get you to just spend a little more time on the question of the role of the board around strategy. Yeah,
so I think the role of the board is to have a CEO that engages them on strategy. And so absolutely we engage on strategy. I bring here the 5 strategic issues. We had a board retreat last week, coincidentally. And the first day was all around 5 fundamental strategic questions where I wanted to have dialogue, an open dialogue. We had very open, rich, back and forth, a lot of debate, and that was healthy. What is not healthy is when you have your leadership team in the room and you have board members conjecturing about strategy and the management's thinking they don't know what they're talking about. And at least in our industries move fast. It's hard for a board to keep up. Now, it's our job to keep the board educated and put the real issues on the table. If you as a board member feel like the real issues aren't being discussed, then raise your hand. I'll say my board this year, this was our annual strategy retreat. And 2 meetings ago, they said, we do not want you to do a show and tell of the strategies. We got them. We know them. Bring the toughest issues that you're grappling with in, and let's talk about those, and make it less than 5 or 5 or less, and each question's allowed to have no more than 10 PowerPoints, because we want to talk. We want to engage. And it was the best board meeting we've had. So I think there's a lot of room for dialogue. I just think what I have seen in some situations is when the management team is in the room and the board starts second-guessing and conjecturing, it's not constructive either way.
Marissa?
I would just add, like at a recent Walmart meeting I was at, one of our directors had this fun slogan that just kind of stuck with me, where he said, the board should vet, not set strategy. Right? The idea is talk about it, have the board go through it, but he basically made the point, which I agree with completely, is that the board will never be as close to what's happening in the business and as close to how various strategies are playing out, that they can have a lot of the nuanced view that management does. And so vet, not set.
You know, when I get approached about this question, I say, look, in the vast majority of situations, the CEO is the strategy and the strategy is the CEO. There's another layer of execution, all right, over there. So how do you define what the CEO is? Well, the CEO is identified by, here's my vision for the company, here's where I want to take it, and here's how well I'm able to execute it. That's it. And the probability that a board is going to be closer to the ground in terms of figuring out what the right strategy is, in today's world, as a practical matter, for most publicly traded corporations, is really low. And here's the irony. We have all of these legal regulations that require independence. The trouble is, the more independent a director is, the lower the probability that they can tell one part of their anatomy from their elbow in terms of what the strategy for the company can actually be. So the irony is, in order to get the level of third-party validation and independence that the legal regime requires, we're imposing a disconnect in terms of directors' ability actually to be good strategic advisors. At the other end of the spectrum, if you look at a startup company, take the early days of Google, all right? You will typically have venture capitalists deeply invest in the company, know a great deal about the operation of the industry, can really be into the game up to their eyeballs in terms of setting strategy with the founders. By the time you've morphed to a public company, that's not the world you have anymore. And the role of the board of directors in a typical private Silicon Valley pre-IPO company, when it comes to strategy, I think is fundamentally different than what happens post-IPO. And part of the reason for that change is it's the lawyer's fault, as most things are. Other questions? Oh, this is unbelievable. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, John. You've spoken most of the evening on your role as CEO of eBay. I wonder if you'd spend a few minutes talking about your role as director at Intel.
Sure. I'll try to say stuff that's useful. I mean, I can say a lot of bland stuff. I would say what we are working to do more of in the Intel board, and I've learned, by the way, one of the best things, have your CEO go on a board. I have learned I am so much of a better CEO because I've sat on the Intel board. I don't know if you feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you realize what it's like to sit in that seat. I mean, you realize what it's like to sit in the seat all day long and never get to speak. You realize what it's like to get 4,000 PowerPoints and 2,000 acronyms you don't understand, right? You realize how frustrating it is when you feel like the real conversation is not really happening. And you don't know whether to speak up in front of management or wait till they're not there, but you don't have enough time alone with the CEO. So a lot of what I have ended up learning and adapting at eBay, I've learned partly from my Intel board experience. And so I think asking your CEO to sit on a public company board, only in our case, I'm only on one, has been enormously valuable. Two, I think the Intel board, one of the things we've done, we had a CEO succession over the last year. And this has been a wonderful process because we spent so much time together alone. And there was some real, the storming foreman. And it's why I took the eBay board off site for the first time last week. Because I realized that in the Intel board, we had spent 3 full weekends alone up at Half Moon Bay Ritz, interviewing candidates and grappling things. And just the time together, the social time together, and the time together, I think, dramatically improved understanding, allowed for direct conversation that I think addressed some misperception, and just built a culture and an ethos that was more collaborative and direct. And so, and again, that's something because at eBay, I've been trying to get them in and get them out because I want to be efficient users of their time. This time I said, you know what, we're going away for 2 days. Because time together, a dinner together, alone, having a little bit of space in the agenda for interaction. So that'd be an example of some of the things I've tried to learn from Intel that I've applied at eBay. And we got a great new CEO. The other thing we did that turned out, I think, to have worked well, different people can have different opinions on this. Intel has a history of internal CEO candidates. And one of the criticisms of Intel right now is it's too insular. And so we made a decision to do an external search with explicit internal candidates. And the notion was, if we then chose the internal candidate, both that candidate and the world would know that that candidate was the best person in the world for the job. And it was painful in the short term for the organization because they thought, oh my God, they may bring in an outsider. But in the end, I think Brian Krasenich, who's the new CEO, is fully empowered because he did. We saw the best candidates in the world. And Brian was the best candidate for Intel right now. And I think he's much more empowered in the eyes of the employees and in the eyes of shareholders and the eyes of others as a result. So in our case, that worked well. It was a little hairy in the short term because the organization was quite nervous about it. But I think it'll work out well in the long term.
Now, Marissa, you're on the Walmart board.
Yeah.
Any perspectives? What have you learned from that experience?
I mean, I think all those same things are true. I think that there's lots of things that you draw on, even if it's just a perspective or an idea. And I think that it's been really helpful. I don't think you want to be on too many. Yeah. You sometimes hear about people who are on 3, 5 other boards. Like that doesn't work. So I mean, for me, I'm on one public company board, which is Walmart, and one private company board that's here in the Bay Area that has a much smaller time commitment.
Right. Last question. We haven't had any questions from the right side. There you go. Hand came up first.
Thank you both for speaking tonight. You're both change agents brought in. You're both turnarounds. How are you handling succession planning and career pathing, succession planning for your positions with your board?
Wow, isn't that a little soon to be asking? I mean,
never too soon.
It's never too soon. John, I guess you've had more experience around that than?
Well, we talk every year. We have a succession conversation. We have a talent conversation every year. Our September board meeting, we take a couple of hours, and it's not just CEO succession. It's down 2-3 levels where we go through and we talk through. And I come prepared. I'm expected to come prepared with my assessment of the leadership team. Say roughly 50 deep, I would say, if I go 2 levels down. And then one of the things they've insisted on, which is just, I think, great, for the top performers, they want to know what their development priorities are. Because we've got Tom Tierney's a wonderful director I have. He's saying, usually what happens is your top performers, you don't invest enough in their development. And so I have to come in with saying, what are the top performers? What are the areas they need to grow in the next year? And then, in that context, we talk about hit by the bus, and then we talk about, I give my view on who potential CEO candidates could be and where they are, and what I'm doing to try to have the luxury, I hope, of 3, 4, 5 candidates, when I'm ready to step down. And so it's just an explicit dialogue. One strange thing, it is a little funky at times, because I said, they said, well, there's no ready now candidate. It's really hard to keep a ready now candidate.
There you go.
So it's like, all right, guys, you got one ready, or you got one now, and you may have a ready now, but sometimes this notion you have to have many ready now candidates, you don't keep people that are ready to become CEO if they're really good for long periods of time. So there's also an art of the planning of the timing. And I talk about my timing and where I think the people are, and see if we can get a sync together of when they'll be ready and when I'll step down.
Marissa?
Well, I'm much earlier in my tenure, so in my case, we've had the, like, what if I got hit by the bus? Like, what would be sort of the emergency contingency plan? And we're now, just in the next few months, is on our board agenda to actually go through a deeper succession look.
Yeah. So essentially, I serve on 2 public company boards, and this is an area where we've invested a lot of energy because the success of the company really is driven almost entirely by the success of senior management. Right? Whether it's financial engines or at KKR, you're making really big strategic decisions, and you need them to be made by extraordinarily competent and well-informed people. And we have a very disciplined process at both companies where we look at what we call points of failure, and we look at it 2 levels deep. You've got the CEO. You need to know where you're going to go if for any reason there's an issue with the CEO. You don't want any hesitation, and the portfolio of alternatives for most boards can generally well be defined with precision. All right, we've got an internal candidate and we're ready to go there. We're not sure we've got an internal candidate. We're going to conduct a search. Then you need a plan for who's going to be running the company in the interim. All right, and strategically, you can either promote an internal person on an interim basis, or in many situations, it's good advice to have a director who can actually act as an interim CEO. As you're looking at skill sets on a board of directors, many of you in this room are well advised to ask, is there somebody on the board who can step in for 3 to 6 months and run this company while we're trying to figure out who the CEO is, where there's no doubt that this interim director really is interim. They're not expected to be able to take over the job. Also, look at development. If you're lacking certain people in certain functions, it's always much better to train people from within the organization than to bring in somebody else, because you're then taking a culture risk. There's no amount of checking of resumes and checking of references that'll tell you that once a person comes in, how are they going to get along with the rest of the team? That's the big risk you run whenever you bring an outside agent in, but by the same token, sometimes you need a change agent. You need specifically to get somebody from outside the organization to help change things up and bring new blood in. And that, by the way, is one of the great reasons to do acquisitions. All right? We need new skill in mobile. We need new skill, in payments. We need new skill in whatever. We're not going to grow that internally. There's so much happening in Silicon Valley. You need to bring that new technology in. And that, in a certain sense, in my view, is one of the most important things a board of directors can do. Get the talent, skill moving through the organization at the right pace and in the right way, so that valuable people feel that they're valued and that they know that you're doing a good job of stewardship. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for John and Marissa. They've been terrific. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you very much for attending the session this evening. You've got all the program material. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, where we're going to have a conversation with Gary Ratelny, the CEO of ISS. Fruit will be provided. Thank you.